Welcome to the League of Women Voters of Snohomish County Forum for candidates for representative for Legislative District 39, Position 2. My name is Nadine Shanti. I'm your moderator, and I am also a member of the League of Women Voters of Snohomish County. Candidates for Position 2 representative for LD 39 are Tyller Boomgaarden, Carolyn Eslick, Kathryn Lewandowsky, and Jessica Wadhams. As always, the League has invited all candidates, and they are all with us today. The League thanks the candidates for running for office, for their willingness to serve if elected, and for participating in this forum. It is the policy of the League to be nonpartisan. Therefore, we neither endorse nor oppose candidates or parties. We do take positions on issues which we have studied and on which we have reached consensus. Ground rules from this forum were sent ahead of time to all the candidates, and they have agreed to abide by the stated rules of decorum and will refrain from interrupting, personal attacks, or disruptive behavior. These rules will be strictly enforced. Let me briefly explain the question and answer period rules. Questions have not been shared with the candidates, and we thank all those community members who sent us recommendations about local issues. I will pose the questions. Each candidate will have 90 seconds to respond. Additional or less time may be allowed for specific questions, and I will state this change clearly. We are using a countdown timer that is visible to all candidates. It shows elapsed time when there are 15 seconds remaining and when your time is up. Time limits on answers will also be strictly enforced. When you see the timer turn red and you hear the chime, you are out of time. I will change the starting order for each question, rotating through all the candidates to ensure a random and fair sequence. The order for the first question will be as follows: Mr. Boomgaarden, Ms. Eslick, Ms. Lewandowsky, and Ms. Wadhams. The first question will be a matter of introducing yourself to the voters, and so we're shortening the time for that one. It will be 60 seconds. Let's begin. This first question goes to Mr. Boomgaarden.
Hi, my name is...
What qualifications and experience make you a strong candidate for this position? Thank you.
So, in my experience is based off of a bottom up view. So most of the time when we look at voters, who we vote for the House, it should be the People's House. That's the nickname for it. And I'm uniquely qualified because I have a diversity of experience, such as security contracting or the United States Army, regarding issues that the state has been experiencing with law enforcement candidates and law enforcement hiring practices. I've been in the hiring process for Arlington Police Department for the last 2 years. The system is cumbersome, and I feel like my perspective from the bottom up would be very helpful and beneficial for getting more law enforcement into the field. I yield my time.
Thank you, Mr. Boomgaarden. Ms. Eslick, your ideas. Same question. You're muted.
My name is Carolyn Eslick, and I live in Sultan, Washington, and have since the early 80s, or 1979 to be exact. My qualifications are that I have been the state representative for almost 5 years now, and prior to that, I was mayor for the city of Sultan for almost 10. And before that, I was on city council for 6. But during that time, I owned a restaurant for 20 years that was located on Highway 2. And after that, the experience I got was in business development. I started an organization called Grow Washington to help start up businesses during the last recession. So I feel like I am very qualified, and I feel like I have a lot more work to do at the state level. Thank you.
Thank you. Ms. Lewandowsky?
Always forget to unmute. Yeah, my name is Kathryn Lewandowsky, and I feel like I'm well qualified because during my nursing career, I've always been very active with my nurses union, working as local unit chair on negotiating teams, and as a local shop steward, helping to protect the nurses that I work with. And in that work, I did a lot of work of going down into Olympia when we did in-person lobby days and such down there, and meetings with going to different committee meetings and testifying down it. So I kind of have I feel like I have a very good understanding of how Olympia works. So with that experience and just my whole life experiences of being a nurse and a mother, and raising 3 children in Washington State, I feel like I'm a very good candidate for this position.
Thank you. Ms. Wadhams, same question.
Yes, so I am a strong candidate because of my passion to help others and my drive to see that it gets done. As district lines have changed, so have its constituents, and it's really important that these changes are reflected in our representation, so that we can make sure that the needs, concerns, and values of the community are being equally addressed. I have been working in activism and community organizing for the last several years. I'm currently a co-chair for the Training and Education Committee for the National Women's Political Caucus and co-founder for the Lake Stevens BIPOC and Allies Advocacy Group. I've also done lots of volunteering for Cocoon House, PTA for my son, and I once coached volleyball for the Boys and Girls Club. I have 2 children, both of which utilize special needs accommodations, and I'm just excited to be here. So thank you very, very much for the opportunity.
Thank you. Ms. Eslick, our next question is for you. Please speak to ways that you would address homelessness.
Thank you for that question. When I was mayor, that was the first task that I dealt with in 2010, 2011, that we had 40 homeless in our community, and they were a real strain on our resources. So I called the leadership together to be able to do an intervention, which we did, and we got them the resources they need. So I continue to work in that arena, but also I am very involved in mental health, and I am a strong proponent to making sure that we get the homeless with mental health off the streets first, and that should happen within the next 2 years with a bill that was passed from the Senate, ready to go to the House, and it will be as soon as we get enough beds, which is almost there. We need 100 more beds in order to implement the involuntary commitment for the homeless that are mentally ill. Thank you.
Thank you. Ms. Lewandowsky, same question.
Yeah, homeless is such a very sad issue, and I feel really bad because I feel like the industry that I work in is one of the major causes of homeless for people, with medical bankruptcy and such being so rampant throughout our country, actually. So we definitely need to be adding more services, expanding services, and helping people to lift them up out of poverty. And we just cannot allow, that is not how we should be taking care of our people. We need to have more values. That's what we did. That's what our country was based on. We built their homes. We had barn raising parties and home raising parties. That's what we did. We took care of our neighbors, and we need to get back to those roots. So we definitely need to expand our network of support for our homeless community. And I think that working on our healthcare issues will help with that a lot, especially, and behavioral health is a big issue.
Thank you. Ms. Wadhams, your thoughts?
Yeah, so it's really imperative that the unhoused individuals get housing support, aid services, including better medical care, mental health, addiction treatment. In addition to that, we really need to make sure that we're emphasizing, building more high density affordable housing, especially near transit and jobs, and continuing to protect tenant laws as well. My parents both experienced homelessness at different situations, and it's extremely upsetting and concerning to see how much we have of that happening right now, and it is absolutely a crisis. And so it's really important in this next legislative session that we really prioritize that and really look for long-term solutions to keep everybody with a house over their head and safe. So yeah, that's what I would aim to do and work. Oops, sorry.
Thank you. Mr. Boomgaarden, same question.
Yes, ma'am. So one of the things that I'm seeing is that as the war in Ukraine continues on, that we continue to implement policies that are beneficial towards refugees. I believe that we should try and shift gears into making sure when the war is over, that those same policies can be used and implemented on our own local population. I think it's very important that we focus on that. As well, I think that any tax that we have regarding the creation of new homes and new properties should either be null and void or significantly reduced. Housing is going to be one of the main drivers in the 21st century for creation of wealth and being able to retain that wealth through equity. And so I think building new homes and creating new policies specifically around home ownership would be beneficial. I yield my time.
Thank you. Timer, if you would set the timer to 90 seconds, we will have more time for the questions that are coming up. And this question is regarding hospital care, and it goes to you first, Ms. Lewandowsky. The question is, as hospital mergers happen with greater frequency, do you have concerns about limited health care options in religious hospital systems? What actions, if any, would you recommend?
That is a huge concern of mine. I spent the first 15 years of, no, probably 25 years of my career in the Catholic hospital system. And it does limit people's access to different medical care that they might want or need. Even things with like, we could not even discuss with patients if they had questions when the Right to Life bill passed. We couldn't even give them any kind of information, or we were threatened with losing our job. And I felt that that was wrong, because that may have potentially been something that's, I do not have the right to decide that for anybody. So yes, these large mergers do a couple of things. They limit the access to care. They also don't. There's no competition, and so you can't really have competition in medical anyway. But there does need to be some. You have to be able to have some place to go to, and some competition to try to lower the prices. Obviously, everything we've done in the past has not had any kind of impact in lowering the cost of care for people in America for health care. We pay twice what the rest of the world pays, and we have worse outcomes. So we need to, and the other option, the other problem is that there's too many areas of our state.
Ms. Lewandowsky, sorry, time is up.
That's okay.
Thank you. Ms. Wadhams, your thoughts on the same question?
Yes, so I'm of the belief that religious ideology really should not dictate what kind of healthcare services that a patient can utilize. And as a legislator, I would really work to create higher restrictions for faith-based church or faith-based hospitals, to put their requirements in place as far as what they will or will not do. But ultimately, at the end of the day, it's about educating the public. I think oftentimes people do not know that these hospitals are being run by faith-based organizations, and therefore are not aware of the services that they may be lacking or not offering. And so, more than anything, I would really aim to create, standards in place for full disclosure for people who are seeking services in these hospitals, so that they can understand that by utilizing those hospitals, they may or may not be getting the services that they're looking for. And also above that, making sure that there's more restriction when it comes to these mergers between hospital corporations and faith-based organizations. Unfortunately, there's a lot of counterproductive work that's happening with that issue. So, thank you.
Mr. Boomgaarden, same question.
So what's important is protecting the doctors and the patient's right to medical care. right? One of the best ways to be able to do that is to say that a hospital is entitled to its opinion in terms of the medical practices that it wants to implement, but the doctor and the patient are the ultimate deciders of their own medical care. And that should apply to pretty much any form of care. If you go to a Catholic hospital, and not to say that they wouldn't give you the care that you need, but you need to get birth control, right? It shouldn't be the hospital's policy to dictate what you can and can't do. It should be between you and your doctor. So as a legislator, I would like to protect the doctor's right to be able to work with the patient towards the medical care that they specifically request, not to tell the hospital, you have to do something. Or the doctor that they have to do something, but protect the right of the doctor to be able to decide what medical care that they can provide, as well as protect the patient's right to receive the medical care that they desire. I yield my time.
Thank you. Ms. Eslick, in question.
Yes. So large corporations, the ones that are taking over our small hospitals, on one hand concerns me because it takes away their local control. But on the other hand, and especially in my area, if that hadn't happened, we probably would have lost our hospital. So there's, two sides to every story, so to speak. I am against unified healthcare. I think it's important that we have choices. And I think it's important if the private hospitals where I've always gotten good care, if they are if they're in danger of losing, their budget, so to speak, because of everything being so expensive, including our wages for our nurses and our doctors, and we're in a desperate need of both to supply our medical hospitals and clinics, and I just really think it's important that we have choices, and so adults need to be educated where they're going, and they usually are. When you walk into a private hospital, there's usually immediate identification that is a Catholic hospital. So those are my feelings about it, but there's always two sides. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, and Ms. Wadhams, you will start with the next question. How could the education funding system be adjusted to continue to improve equity in public school systems, even in the event of a local levy failure?
Yeah, so, I first and foremost want to say, I think we've done a lot of really great things in the last session, just with, making sure that there's free lunches for kids, and that there's sanitary products and bathrooms for, menstruating individuals. And so we're certainly starting to chip away at some of the inequities that have already been there historically. But, in particular, I really feel like it's the state's responsibility. It's their constitutional commitment to uphold equal education for all of our public schools, and leaving the burden of decision up to the communities can really often be, biased and counterproductive, which ultimately, it creates a problem for our future. Ultimately, we need to be making sure that our children have the best education possible. It's a way to secure our own futures as well. And I don't believe that burden should be placed on communities or cities. And ultimately, with the district that we're looking at, it's very rural, and oftentimes, the rural communities tend to get forgotten. And so when it comes to infrastructure and things like that, I think we really need to be prioritizing communities where they have the largest needs and making sure that we're getting them completely funded and properly safe for our children. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Boomgaarden, same question.
So, local and small school districts are chronically underfunded here, in my opinion. I actually live across the street from the Darrington School, so it's an important piece of the community. But one of the main problems is that the community at large has become quite a bit of a retirement community with fixed incomes. So when the price of something goes up, it's going to impact their bottom line, and they're going to want to reduce taxes. That being said, the state can't fill in the gap every time, because then, if we all just drop the levy, then the state will come in and fix the problem itself, and then now we're all sharing that problem instead of having the local communities make and decide what it is. So I refer back to my previous statement about building more homes in these rural communities, so that way individuals can be able to have those levies and then share the burden at a lower cost to them on a regular basis, and they can get to be able to dictate and decide their own particular taxes that they need. More reciprocal economies in fragile communities like Darrington are going to create a more sustainable economic growth for schools. I yield my time.
Thank you. Ms. Eslick, your thoughts on this question?
So the McCleary decision a few years ago did support an increase in wages, and it increased our portion, the state portion of property tax. So I don't support increasing any more in that area. But I do support the fact that, and it was proven in this election, in this the last school election, that more education to the public was needed. There seems to be a big distrust on the way the school districts are spending their money. And our local one was very good about making sure there was many open houses and many information sent to the houses so that they could learn more about the budget and what it actually covered. I think that's a big part of it. I think that the levies that are happening, the small school districts, we need to make sure that when the crisis happens, that we fund them separately like we did during COVID. We sent the school districts money when we knew that they needed it desperately. So the state's there to help, but I think local control is still the most important part, and I encourage them to educate their community on what they're doing with their money. Thank you.
Thank you. Ms. Lewandowsky, your turn.
Yes, I've had a lot of thoughts about that, because education, I feel, is so very important. It's kind of, education has gotten me where I have gotten from being a single mother with, just a high school diploma. I had to work to get my expanded education. One time I tell the story, and I'll try to be quick. One time I took a wrong turn in Bellevue, and I got lost, and I was just like, I realized, I was surprised. That is an elementary school? Oh my gosh. Oh my. I would never attended an elementary school like that. And I grew up in middle income. So I started thinking, because I feel every child deserves a good education and a good base, right? So, but I think it would be really great to have some kind of a system to where some of those very, very wealthy districts in our state, and we have a few, if they are paying a certain amount above what the average or what the lower end of the scale is, I think there could be like a little surcharge, and that additional money, because those people can afford to pay a little bit more, could go to help some of those underdeveloped areas, to help with the education of those children as those children grow and develop. And if you can help that whole area, then it's going to improve, and gradually things are going to equalize out. And that surcharge would then go away on its own.
Thank you. Mr. Boomgaarden, this question goes first to you. Are there changes to the Washington State redistricting process that you would support? And if so, what would those be?
It's a very good question. So when it comes to Washington State redistricting, and this is across the United States, it's definitely not just here in Washington, that the politicians are the ones that get to decide where things are going to be. There's a lot of nudging and going, okay, so we're not going to redistrict you out because you're currently representing them. I think it should be a little bit less biased towards that. I think it's wrong to divide communities in a way that doesn't allow certain areas to be included or excluded and not allow fresh blood to kind of come in, right? We have a lot of career politicians. Politicians are looking at each other and going, oh, I'd like to protect my job. If you protect my job, I'll protect your job. And then we all can come back together and sing Kumbaya and over in Olympia. And that's okay to a degree. But when you don't allow new people to come in and people want experience because they're risk averse, you get career politicians. And I think that's not beneficial to us. I yield my time.
Thank you. Ms. Eslick, your thoughts on this question?
Well, this is the first time that I have been involved in redistricting at this level. To go back 10 years, 20 years actually, that's when I first ran for state representative in 2020. So, but I wasn't involved this close with redistricting as I was this time. If I were to change it now, for folks that don't know, it did include two Republicans and 2 Democrats, and then a chair, bipartisan chair. And the process got started late because the census was late due to COVID. So there were a lot of moving parts here that don't normally happen this way, as I understand it. I think the main thing that I would do, and I have to agree with Tyler in that we need more public involvement, public comment time. They did reach out, they did have a couple, but not enough. I didn't appreciate the cities and towns in my district being cut in half. It was a total surprise to me that it was going to end up that way, but it is what it is. And hopefully that we can learn from our mistakes in the next 10 years it's ran a little bit more in the public's eye. Thank you.
Thank you. Ms. Lewandowsky, your thoughts on this question?
Oh, I'm so sorry. I guess I just will have to be blunt. Because this was kind of my first experience too of also kind of paying attention with the redistricting process. And being a nurse for as long as I've been a nurse, one of the things I truly feel is that there's only a certain amount of time in a life, right? So please don't waste any of it. And I kind of felt like all of the work and energy that went into that was a waste of time because in the end, they couldn't come to any kind of agreement. And I would like to simplify it and reduce the complexity. And I think it would just be so much simpler to have the lines be on the county lines. Just the counties are going to be the districts, and they can divide up, their, at least at the legislative level, and then use proportional representation to determine the number of representatives each county gets based on population. That would allow so much better representation of the people. It would allow potentially third parties or independents like myself to get into office, and for more people's views to be represented at the state level. Plus, I think it would just save so much money. I just can't imagine the difficulties that the counties experience with having to make such complicated ballots and such. We can save so much time, energy, and money. And like I said, there's only so much time in a life. I yield my time.
Ms. Wadhams, same question.
Yeah, so I do actually appreciate that there is, 2 Democrats and 2 Republicans that are appointed to that, and then a bipartisan person. I think that that's actually great. The only things that I would change are 2 things. First thing being that those individuals that are being put into those positions are reflective of their community. And so I think there could be some better regulation as far as making sure that more people are represented in that room and part of that conversation. And then second of all, I really think just to kind of, reiterate what everybody has been actually saying is to involve the public more and give them more time and space to be able to make an informed decision about what they want. there's a lot of people that didn't have a clue about the redistricting, and that's a shame because they felt like, they'd been duped. And, I think if we were able to do a little bit more of a campaign, if you will, for the public to be able to understand what these legislative district lines changing means and how it affects them, and then give them an opportunity to be able to have a voice, or even in some cases vote at a local level on what exactly it is that they would be okay with or not okay with. I yield my time.
Thank you. Ms. Eslick, this question goes first to you. Following the U.S. Supreme Court ruling overturning Roe versus Wade, would you support making any changes to existing state laws regarding access to abortion? If so, what would they be?
So we need to be clear here that the Superior overturn did not do anything to our Washington state laws. There's still abortions. I think everybody at this level knows that. I am pro-life, and if I could make some changes, I think that the abortion is important to happen when there are situations, and that would be incest, and that would be abuse, and that would be when the mother or child are in danger of life. That's pretty simple and clear. Thank you. I will yield my time.
Thank you. Ms. Lewandowsky, same question.
Yes, I really do appreciate that we have such strong laws regarding women's reproductive rights here in Washington. And I think we could probably strengthen them a little bit more to try to protect them from any assaults on them. And I think, too, that I think we need to make it very clear that the woman's life is just as valuable. And in fact, in my opinion, probably more valuable. And she is the one who has the right to choose. But I don't think that that it is fair for anybody to put a woman's right or life at risk based on their religious belief. And I also believe in HIPAA and the fact that this is something between a doctor and a woman and the patient, and nobody else has the right to interfere. So we just need to make sure things are safe. Thank you.
And thank you. Ms. Wadhams, same question.
Yeah, so I am staunchly pro-choice. It's actually one of the big reasons that I wanted to do this work. I believe that every individual has the right to choose what they want to do with their body. And I am extremely proud that Washington is pro-choice and continues to be. I would aim to continue to expand access for healthcare in general, but as in particular for reproductive healthcare. I also would aim to continue the work in expanding the language within our laws so that it's more inclusive. It is not just women that experience this, it's individuals in general. It's a healthcare concern. It's a matter of human rights, and our government should not be part of that conversation. That's a conversation that should be held between an individual and their doctor. And for whatever reason it is that they are seeking that care is not up for anybody else's discretion other than the person that is experiencing it, as well as their healthcare provider. So that is where I stand with that. And so I would continue to support already existing laws and also expand upon them. Thank you.
And thank you. Mr. Boomgaarden, your thoughts on this question?
So I consider myself pro-choice, right? It's anathema to have somebody that's attached to your body for 9 months without your consent and making those choices and decisions for you isn't right. Especially with what's going on in Louisiana and Texas, I consider that I absolutely 100% abjure suing your neighbor because of their medical practices, as well as forcing women to give birth to children who are not going to be alive without lungs, and so on. and I'm going to have to echo both Ms. Wadham and Lewandowsky. I hope I pronounced that right. I apologize. That it's between you and your doctor, right? It goes back to what I had said before, that your medical care should be between you, your doctor, and, as long as the fetus is considered a patient, I'm 100% on board with it, doctor. We trust doctors with our lives up until it's someone else's. I think that's a very silly thing that we do with society, and I would like to continue keeping abortion accessible here in Washington State. I yield my time.
Thank you. Ms. Lewandowsky, we'll start with you on this question, which is on climate change. Is there legislation that you would support to address the need for local responses to climate change, including through the comprehensive plans for the Growth Management Act?
I'm sure there probably is, but not that I have to say that I am not well versed in the legislation. I totally yield that to my 350 Everett organization that unfortunately I have not been able to attend recently because of all of the activity I've been doing with for healthcare in the state of Washington. But I know that those people are so smart and they are so on top of it. And it was very active with the previous climate change bill that I was really sad that it didn't pass. So I know that the experts are out there. This is just such a, along with keeping our communities healthy, we need to keep our planet healthy, or we just have no options. We've got to keep the planet healthy. And that's got to be a priority. It needs to be a huge priority because we need to pass on, a healthy planet for my children and my grandchildren. And so I know that the scientists are there. They know what we can do. We can make changes. It's going to hurt. It's going to hurt some people, but it's a necessity. We have to do it if we want to survive. So.
Thank you. Ms. Wadhams, same question.
Yeah, so I really think we should be incentivizing our cities and communities to adopting more comprehensive, clean and green alternatives to building, development, infrastructure, and just general practices. I also think there's a lot of untapped opportunity for our local areas to be more educational with their communities about ways that families can also be helpful in aiding against our climate crisis that we have. I live in Lake Stevens, and so I've seen, unfortunately, the other side of things where when we don't have checks and balances in place and we're not holding cities accountable, we can see major problems with our environment and things being done to it, people building on wetlands and things like that, things that are outside the scope of what's allowed. And so, it's important that we bring together environmental agencies as well as local authorities to discuss what the options are and to discuss what those solutions can truly look like and being reasonable about them. But ultimately, from a state level, we really need to be holding our cities accountable to, ensuring that they're utilizing what they can to make sure that they're green and clean. So, thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Boomgaarden, same question.
So I feel really blessed when I talk about this because I live in the town of Darrington. It's completely covered in trees, one of the most beautiful portions of Washington State in general. Highly encourage any of you to visit if you haven't. So it's important for local communities to be in charge of perceived needs, right? Because the state is only able to see so much with its massive eyes versus the little ones to find little details. But that doesn't mean that there isn't a top-down approach. I think one of the main problems is how Washington State defines a town and community. And how many areas within Snohomish County aren't being able to be included in that. The UGA assessments won't include certain areas, but we need to try and focus more on expanding these these abilities to manage more by changing the definition of what a community is, for them to be able to be in charge. I also believe that we should open a SOMAX facility that can help create clean water and use biomass that we'd ordinarily throw away to create cleaner energy. I yield the rest of my time.
Thank you. Ms. Eslick?
Yes, thank you. And I know that last year there was an attempt to add to the growth management plan a climate change portion, and it didn't fly. But I won't be surprised if it comes up again. But I truly believe that since we are already the most progressive policy in environmental climate change in the United States, I think that we have done a great job already. I think that what we need to make sure that we don't mandate our communities and we keep it in local control and let them decide what's good for them and continue with the incentives. I think that is the way we work this climate change, making sure that you are rewarded for the good deeds that you do in building and in living. And we've come so far because in the 40s, we had an aluminum plant in my neighborhood that killed cows because of the steam that was coming out. And since then, of course, look at what they have done in that arena. So it is amazing. We've come so far. We all understand how important it is, but do not mandate it. That's all I ask. Do not mandate it. Thank you.
Thank you. Our next question will go to Jessica, to Ms. Wadhams first. And that question is, what do you believe are the 3 best ideas for reducing the likelihood of violent firearm incidents in our community, in our county, and our state?
Yes, so I think that our state has done a really good job with making sure that we have safe gun laws here. I would like to see an assault ban. I would also like to see more comprehensive background checks, as well as standards for storing guns. I do recognize, though, that, our district is very rural. A lot of people who utilize guns in this area are using them for their work or their land or their farms, agriculture, things like that. And so I would just seek to look towards making stronger and safer gun laws without penalizing safe and responsible gun owners. And yeah, that's pretty much it. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Boomgaarden, your response.
So my 3 ideas are going to kind of run against the grain when it comes to what Olympia wants. So number 1 is getting more law enforcement officers out of there, which is my number 1 priority. By getting more law enforcement out there, we can make sure that we have the eyes and ears, smell if need be, to be able to find these people who who aren't supposed to have firearms or prevent them from being able to use them. Number 2 is making sure that we can get officers into pre-2019 laws to be able to continue with traffic stops, to continue with, if somebody is committing a crime, to pursue them. Because when you pay attention to what Snohomish County or what local police officers talk about, it's that when they do a traffic stop, they find a bunch of drugs, they find a bunch of firearms, they find a bunch of equipment that these people aren't supposed to be having. We've taken away the teeth of law enforcement. And then finally, it's not focusing on inane, bizarre firearm laws that have no correlation to anything, such as the magazine ban. It's not helpful. It doesn't do anything. It's not going to change anything in terms of violent crimes. We're focusing on the wrong things. I yield my time.
Thank you. Ms. Eslick.
Well, I would like to use everything that Tyler said as one of my suggestions, because he's right on the money. We absolutely have got to give the ability for our police officers to do their job, and it is not there now. But I also would like to see us, our database and our computer that's being used for storing the information of our gun owners is not universal. And that's where so much of our problem comes in. So we need to spend some, in the state that's got the most tech state in the whole United States, and we don't have, and the state is always lagging in that arena. We need to have better communication database for this arena. The other thing, I believe we need to be looking at this after we take care of making sure that police officers have what they need and the database. We need to be looking at this in the public health arena. And I think that most of you understand where that goes. It has to be approached in a different manner. I yield. Thank you.
And thank you. Ms. Lewandowsky, your thoughts on this question?
Yeah, we haven't been going in the right direction. We've been basically, thankfully, we are very good here in Washington, but if you look around the country, we haven't. And it's obvious that some things work and some things don't. And personally, I think we just need to not allow people to have weapons of war. I'm totally for people having guns to be able to protect themselves and for hunting and all of that. But and Tyler, I'm in Arlington, so yeah, I've been to Darrington a lot. I'm a trail rider. I've met many people out on the trails that are carrying guns, and inevitably, when someone is carrying a weapon of war, an assault weapon, they aren't the same as a person who is hunting or even protecting themselves. They are out there and they are acting as a predator. And I learned this by taking training from a police officer for safety on the trails. Look at that person and how are they behaving when they're carrying an assault weapon on their back. I have not seen one here in the United States carry a weapon like that without having a predator attitude. And that's, we can't allow that. But I think the bigger problem is that for our youth, we've got to start improving their educational opportunities, their opportunities to get a good paying job, to have affordable houses, because I feel like there's just no hope for them. They've lost hope.
Thank you. Mr. Boomgaarden, if elected, what ideas do you have for working productively with your staff, colleagues, and members of the community whose ideas are different from yours?
Well, it's funny you mentioned that. I actually love talking to people that I don't necessarily agree with. It's my favorite pastime. Usually causes people to roll their eyes at me and go, "Oh, we've talked about this for the last 2 hours," even if there's something they're passionate about. So the answer is I want to be friendly with everybody. I think disagreements are not a sign that you're unable to work together. I think disagreements are a sign that you're able to bring your ideas and be comfortable with them and present those things to each other. I would want my staff to be friends with each other, not coworkers, not peers. I want them to be friends and be on friendly terms, that they're able to be comfortable with accepting that they're different, right? I have way more liberal friends than I do conservative friends. I don't agree with the Mormon church, but when the Mormons came knocking at my door, the first thing I did was talk to them for the next 5 hours about theology. It's just something I love to do. It's got to the point where they were looking at their watch and going, "Oh, look at the time." It's something that I'm particularly passionate about and something that I want to continue doing, but on an official capacity for you. I yield my time.
Thank you. Ms. Eslick, your thoughts on this question?
Well, so in Olympia, Republicans are 41 representatives to 57 Democrats. And so that was the last year. Before that, we were still in the minority. I had to learn. But I come from a family of 8 kids. And as we grew up, there were 4 Democrats and 4 Republicans, and my mom and dad were split. So we had many times at the dinner table of discussing issues in one side or the other. So we learned that, first of all, you have to learn to listen, right? And not talk over people. That's really important. And really try to understand their position. And sometimes, sometimes we can be swayed, especially if the goal is the same. I found working in the last 5 years at the legislature to be it actually was fun. I enjoyed the first 3 years so that I could actually go in the hallways and chat with my committee members in the hallway. But the last 2 years of COVID really dampened that, really put a stop to a lot of that. So I'm looking forward to a year of sane legislation starting in January. Thank you.
Thank you. Ms. Lewandowski, your thoughts?
Can you repeat the question, please?
Absolutely. If elected, what ideas do you have for working productively with your staff, colleagues, and members of the community whose ideas are different from yours?
Yeah, I think I have to agree a lot with Tyler too, that I enjoy kind of and Carolyn, that I enjoy having those conversations with people that I don't necessarily agree with. And I think I try to look at all sides, because everybody has good ideas. And a lot of times the answer does come from talking about throwing everything out there and picking out the best of both worlds. So we can all learn from each other, and especially when we're trying to fix a problem, and we need to listen to all sides. I try to do that as much throughout my whole nursing career, but especially now that I'm more in a supervisory role. Some of my nurses might say, no, I don't, because I have to draw the line sometime and say, no, we have to do this now. But I do try to look at the whole picture, look at where they're coming from, and try to make changes and listen to their ideas, because a lot of times their ideas might be better than mine, and I'm totally okay with that. I'll yield my time.
Thank you. Ms. Wadhams, same question.
Yeah, so first of all, I have a teenage son and a toddler, so I'm pretty used to having people going against what I think should be done. And if you're a mom, you understand those circumstances. It can be tough, but you navigate it. And I kind of view it in a similar fashion, that if both parties are showing up with the intention of creating solutions with a healthy respect of one another, then we can get some things done. I think it's really important, especially with these very big issues, that we can remove the emotion a bit for a moment and really pay attention to the facts and the data and speaking to those things to figure out what those solutions would be. I also think that just having open communication with the communities that we're serving and allowing them to have input and voice onto, what these issues are and how they're affected is really important. Especially as a legislator, we're not perfect. We're human beings. We don't know everything. And I think there's a large amount of humility that has to be part of that, in recognizing that it's not always about what you think makes sense. It's also about grabbing people from different places to be able to come to a collective agreement of what's going to be the best mode going forward. So yeah, thank you.
Thank you. You all have been so wonderful with being on top of time tonight, but there are 4 of us and we have to keep a tight schedule here. So unfortunately, I'm going to need to change the time for this last question to 60 seconds to 1 minute. And I'm going to move it along so that you have as much time as you can get. So our last question goes to Carolyn Eslick first. And it is this: what additional issues or information would you like to bring to the attention of the community in case we missed it?
I think the affordable housing issue we haven't really touched on that tonight. There are so many things that can be done to help our people that are so close to losing their homes or losing their apartment. And a gentleman came to me the other night when I stood up and was speaking about home sharing. What a good idea for a senior citizen that owns her home, that is just got an increase in their property tax, to be able to be matched up with somebody that needs a place to live, that can share expenses and share the duties of a home to save her home. It's those kinds of thinking that I think we need to bring back to make sure that we are covering all avenues of helping people from being homeless. And I'll yield my time.
Thank you. Ms. Lewandowsky, the same question, please.
Well, you know, I really appreciate all that you guys have done. I really feel like it's important for our communities to start looking at our two-party system. And I feel that that's been a problem throughout our history here. Right now, both parties are controlled by our corporate donors. So I'm hoping that the people will start looking at that and realizing that maybe those people are not acting in the best interest of the people. So I think that I hope that people will look at my platform and look at me as someone who is not beholden to anybody and would be willing to stand up and be firm and be a voice for the people of the 39th. I feel like we really have to break down this whole two-party control system of our government. Okay.
Thank you so much. Ms. Wadhams, your thoughts?
Yeah, so one thing we haven't talked a whole lot about is jobs. And I think that's the key to a lot of these issues. When we talk about people being unhoused, struggling to make ends meet, the opportunity for jobs is important. And right now we're seeing more than ever how important job worker protections and having good benefits and a livable wage is important, and that people are tired of waiting for that promise to come through. And so, you know, if elected, I would really push for that. I would also push to ensure that worker protections continue to be protected. And I am encouraging of collective bargaining for folks. You know, it is about the people, and it's about making sure that they're getting a fair shake. And corporations and businesses are not always the best at holding up those values. So jobs. We just need to get jobs going. So thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Boomgaarden.
So an extremely underrated portion of what's been going on in the state arena is that towns are now allowed to implement sales tax, and be that as it, you know, your opinions one way or the other, that's the reality of it. One of the problems, though, that's come up that nobody's discussing is, you know, the amount of taxation that's happening without representation. So Darrington is a small town, and people who are not even 5 minutes away from me right now in terms of walking distance are paying for those taxes in this small community where they don't have anywhere else to go. I think it's important for us to start working towards making it easier for towns to be able to annex territory and areas that are in the immediate area that are affected by the taxes that they're being impacted by. They're in food deserts or and are isolated. And I think that's really important that we start focusing on that and making sure people are represented.
Thank you, and thank you all. The League appreciates these candidates for joining us and for running for office. A recording of this forum and others will be available on the League of Women Voters of Snohomish County website and YouTube channel. Find links at lwvsnoho.org. We encourage you to explore additional information about these and all candidates. The Snohomish County voter pamphlet will be mailed to residences starting July 13th. Vote411.org, sponsored by the League of Women Voters, is another good source for nonpartisan voting information. Ballots will be mailed on July 15th, and Election Day is August 2nd. Please vote. This concludes our candidate forum. Again, thank you for joining us, and please be a voter.